My name is Richard Bliss Brook. I'm an ontological coach from Lanai, Hawaii. And catch me this week on the Jesse Tedisco Show.
Richard Bliss. I love that, by the way. Brook, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, Jesse.
It's great to have you here, man. I know we've been connecting for some time, trying to get you on the show, and now the day has finally come. So want to hear a little bit about, for the world to listen to this and for people to kind of see a little bit more about who you are and what you do. If you could just share a little bit about your journey with us, that'd be awesome, brother.
Well, the snapshot is I cheated to get out of high school. And when you do that, and I was raised in the Central Valley of California in the ag community. And if you don't get a college education in Central California, you're going to end up right back in ag. Most people came from ag and they end up right back there, either working on the dairy or the farm or the ranch. In my case, I ended up in food processing, a place called Foster Farms, a chicken processing plant. And I worked there for 4 years and I actually loved it. I was upwardly mobile and management material and had myself a red hard hat, which meant something at the chicken plant. And then the chicken plant created a policy that said you couldn't advance any further without a 4-year college degree, which they've since abandoned. But all of a sudden my vision and my career, my path was over. And I really thought I was going to spend the next 40 years there. I loved the place and that kind of had it all mapped out. But with that change, I had to pivot, and the pivot just had me be open to things that I wouldn't normally be open to. Probably the least thing I would be open to is sales and business, because I didn't know anything about business and I didn't like salespeople. But, I guess the one asset I had was curiosity. So, this guy showed me this opportunity and I didn't understand it. I didn't really like it. I didn't like what I was going to have to do, but I was curious. And so I kept looking at it, looked at it for 3 weeks over and over and over again.
Wow.
And it wasn't so much the opportunity that caught my imagination. It was the people that were associated with it. They were the first people I'd ever met, ever heard of, that promoted and practiced the concept of personal development. I didn't even know what that was. Never heard of positive mental attitude, never heard of mindset, manifestation, any of that stuff. Of course, this was 1977, but still, the personal development movement was well on its way, 50 years old at that point, at least. And so I got involved, and I got involved because these people said, hey, they asked me questions. Nobody else ever asked me, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to live? And those questions really appealed to me, that somebody was interested in what I was interested in. I didn't really know what I was interested in, but I liked the question. So I got involved. It was sales and business, which I was horrible at. So
what were you selling? What was the what were you selling day to day?
A gasoline additive that you put in your gas tank gives you better gas mileage.
Okay. And were you hanging out at gas stations, or were you going like business to business?
Jesse, I actually did. I have a bottle of it here. I've been using that product for 45 years. I use it in everything, and I sold a ton of it in Georgia. And it was a 32-ounce opaque plastic bottle with this gold-colored liquid in it. And what they taught us to do, you put 1 ounce for every 10 gallons in your gas tank. So what they taught us to do, really, they did teach us to do this, which was hysterical, and I did it. You go to a gas station because, that's where people are filling up. That's where they're present to what they're paying for gas. And of course, you don't have any money because you're broke, so you can't fill your car up. But so, what I do is put like 25 cents of gas in my car, and then you hold this golden bottle up into the sunlight so you can see the measuring graduation, looking for the ounce, and you kind of make this dramatic thing about hold it in the sunlight. And then they told us to like take it down and like squeeze it into the tank, and then hold it up and squeeze it into, hold it up, and just keep doing that till somebody says, what's that?
You're getting people, it's like peacocking. You're getting people like attracted to like what's going on.
Yeah. Some people thought I was peeing in the gas tank, but anyway, none of that stuff worked. And I really face planted for 2.5 years.
Okay.
And then I got it together. And what I got together was my own vision and motivation and expectations and belief. And that took work, took consistent work, but it manifested in some pretty extraordinary success. And so I think I started when I was 22. By the time I was 24, I was driving a borrowed car, sleeping on my sister's couch. By the time I was 28, I was making $40,000 a month. And I had 30,000 people nationwide on my sales team. And, what I tell people is, hey, if you're 28 and you're making $40,000 a month in a legitimate income stream where that income is spread out over tens of thousands of customers, pretty hard to screw that up for the rest of your life. But I did make gallant efforts for the next 40 years to screw that up. I have failed far more than I've succeeded.
Brother, that's we have a very strong parallel. I don't know if you know the names of these companies. Have you ever heard of like DS Max, Grant and Marketing, Smart Circle? Have you ever heard of those companies before?
I have.
So I started my sales career going door to door, business to business, cold call, working for Smart Circle. And so we were selling little basically coupons. So like oil changes at 70% off and Hilton Head Island vacations, 3 days, 2 nights. You got to go see a timeshare, but it's great little property. And then selling sports tickets. And the same thing as you, man. I came from, for me, I personally, I came from a very humble background in Boston, very, very, no money. And I was an entrepreneur very early on because of necessity, scarcity. And so things like buying and selling, trading comic books, baseball cards, shoveling snow for money, just like whatever I could to hustle. And that carried through to this career. I had left the military and I was looking for a job, and it said sports marketing entry level, can make $600 a week, will train, like an ad in the paper, like, how they recruit back in the day. And when I went in there, like you, I saw all these positive, good looking young people that were just excited. And they were saying crazy terms like juice and like all these crazy, like kind of like cultish things. And brother, I was so attracted to it. I got in there, and my first campaign I worked on was Hilton Head Island, sending people for a 3-day, 2-night vacation. And I crushed it. I crushed it because I was excited. I had great work ethic and I could see a ton of people every day. So law of averages were in my favor. And I remember going out and just hitting my first day bonus, which means I sold, over $100 in profit for the day. And I was like, man, I can make $100 a day cash. This is great. And that turned into a 4-year journey of opening up offices around the Southeast and, winning awards and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But it was like the Navy SEALs of sales training, because you had to go out and create something from nothing, and you had to take 90 no's to find 10 yeses. And so we were very much cut from a similar cloth. And much like yourself, when I experienced a windfall of money, I pretty much did my best to try to piss that away when I was younger. So very similar story, brother. So where was the journey from there? So you said you kind of escalated into more of a a national presence, or maybe even a worldwide presence. Like how did that next iteration change from being the salesperson to managing salespeople?
Well, it's a weird story, but the company I was a salesperson in was a big company. It was a $100 million company. It was nationwide. I was the top sales leader, but I didn't have anything to do with the business aspect of it. I was independent sales leader. And one day the owner of the company, he came with his Bluebird bus and he said, hey, let's go tour some of your territory. And we drove around for a week in his Bluebird bus. And halfway through that trip, he said, you want to run this company? Of course, how do you say no? But, you and I are probably the same, right? We don't think about, before we say yes, we don't think, do I know how to run a company?
Especially
how much is he
back
going to,
then? No.
right? How much is he going to pay me? How many hours do I have to work? Right. I didn't think about any of that. I thought, sure. Yeah, I'll run the company. I have no idea how, but I'll do that. And that was a phenomenal learning experience. And I actually learned I had a knack for, deciding where to invest money and spend money and put time and attention. And I had a knack for leading people and nurturing people. And so I did that for 3.5 years. And then I actually pivoted again and I bought for nothing a really struggling, bankrupt company. And I spent the next 33 years building that into, my dream company. And, a lot of different things happened, right? And I just ran, and then I started another one about 25 years later, and I ran them both parallel. And through all of that, what I found my number one skill set was in developing people and business was coaching. And, I call it ontological coaching. That's a fancy word for basically, coaching people on their state of being, which maybe people don't understand that. The simpler form is I coach people on their mood, right? So, whatever we're all up to, we all, if you're going to coach people, they have goals, they have something they're up to, and there's point A and there's point B. Point A is where you're at now. Point B is where you want to go. And, maybe you have a plan, maybe you don't. But as a coach, what I find is figuring out what you need to do to go from point A to point B is not that difficult. Any consultant or any YouTube video can probably tell you that. But making sure that every morning you're in the right state, that's ontological state of being, or simpler, the right mood. If you're in the mood to work out, you'll work out. If you're in the mood to make phone calls, you'll make phone calls. If you're in the mood to follow up, you'll follow up. It's not that difficult. What I tell people is whatever it is you have to do every day that's so darn difficult, what if I paid you $1,000 a day to do that thing? What if I paid you $1,000 a day to eat, clean, and work out?
Yep.
What do you think you'd do?
Right.
What if I paid you $1,000 a day to make 5 phone calls to, prospects? Would you do it or not? Of course you would. And so the do is not hard at all. It's the being. It's the will. It's the conversation. It's the mood. It's the story you tell yourself about what happens if I do this. And if the story you tell yourself is, oh, it's going to be hard, it's going to be painful, I'm not going to like it, they're going to say no, I'm going to get rejected, it's not going to be well, then you don't do it.
Yep.
Unless somebody's coaching you on discipline and commitment, which are admirable traits. This is going to sound like blasphemy, but discipline and commitment are distinctions for people that aren't motivated. If you're motivated to do what you need to do, what do you need discipline for?
That's a good way to look at it. Cause a lot of times you hear, these people out there like Jocko Willink, who's, this Navy SEAL commander, badass guy. And he's like, discipline equals freedom. And he's up at 4:30 every morning working out, like showing pictures of his watch. And, then you hear the flip side of that, like motivation is fleeting and all this different stuff. So it's a really interesting take on it. And really quick, before I dive into kind of like the behavioral stuff, I want to talk about this idea that I was listening to a philosopher's mixtape somewhere on YouTube, and it talks about the idea of it's not moving the wheelbarrow up the hill that's the problem. It's the thought of it. It's exactly the idea of it. It's exactly encapsulates what you're saying. And so, I've since fast forwarded my journey from that sales career through, I'm a fiduciary, a wealth manager now, and I do a lot of behavioral and emotional training with my clients. So I want to really kind of get into that because I'm into that. I'm into psychology. I'm into, affecting change in people through understanding who they are and how to lead them. So talk about specifically, if you can, what it is that how you affect change in your clients and how you work on their moods and behaviors to spur action or inaction.
Yeah. In the simplest form, it's asking questions that flush out the story. So, the quote you read earlier, it's not pushing the wheelbarrow up the hill, it's the thought of it. Well, thought is a story. So if you had a wheelbarrow and you needed to push it up the hill and you weren't pushing it up the hill, if you're pushing it up the hill, you don't need me. But if you're not pushing it up the hill and you want to push it up the hill, I would ask you, what are you thinking about right now that you're not pushing the wheelbarrow up the hill? And just lots of questions, which are not in a book. They're not scripted. They're totally intuitive. You ask the question that's there to ask in the moment because you're totally present to your client. You're not thinking about other things.
Yes.
And you just ask the questions that would illuminate what is the story, thought, that they're telling themselves, that they're embedded in, that they're believing. that's changing their body chemistry, that's holding them in place,
Yes.
that's having them not push the wheelbarrow up the hill. And so if you ask enough questions, people will tell you the truth. And if you're paying attention, you can hear the truth versus, BS that people tell.
Yep.
And, okay, somebody says, well, what if I get halfway and I get tired and the load falls over? Okay, I hear you. So the story is of inevitable failure. Yeah. Okay. Well, then I might ask, well, what if you make it?
Yeah, right? The flip side. Yeah.
So, almost everything that we do as coaches we're not inventing something that the client's never heard of or never considered, right? The client obviously considered what if he makes it, or he'd never have the goal to push the wheelbarrow up the hill. But, we all get in ruts and we get in these, circles, and, hardly anybody's very good at coaching themselves.
Right.
And once we get in this rut, it just feeds on itself, right? And it spirals and it gets embedded. It's like a tick, right? You just can't get it out, and then it infects you, and then you get sick. And then how do you get the tick out? It's too late. You need somebody to come in and, do something more powerful than flick a tick. And it's all about changing the story. And it's all about, sharing with people what's going on and having them understand, okay, have you ever pushed the wheelbarrow up the hill before? And maybe they have. Okay, well, let's talk about that, right? Did you made it before, right? So you just guide them to change their vision. And if they've never pushed the wheelbarrow up the hill before, then I might ask them, so how do you know that you're going to fail? And they'll say, well, I don't, but what if I do? I'm worried that I will. But you never actually failed pushing the wheelbarrow. No. Well, then would it be true that you're making that up? Yes. Okay, well, if you're going to make something up,
make up a story of success, right?
Well,
make up something else.
Have you ever heard of self-fulfilling prophecy? Hey, if you make up that the wheelbarrow is going to flip over and you're going to lose all your goodies, how's that make you feel? Oh, not good. And, depressed, angry. Well, if you made it to the top with the wheelbarrow, how's that make you feel? I'd feel great. Okay, which feeling do you think is going to help you push the wheelbarrow up the hill?
It's a journey of leading them to self-actualization, self-realization, and letting them kind of come to the idea that you already have a feeling on or an idea on. They have to kind of be walked through that process. And I think that there's a lot of people, specifically coaches, mentors, leaders, advisors, that, like you said, they need a coach, they need a mentor, they need a leader. So in that vein, I'm sure you probably had at some point have mentors or coaches that inspired you, and like some of the key learnings you learned from them. And the flip side is now today, when you get in those moments where you need a kick in the butt or you need to change a behavior, how are you doing that for yourself?
Well, to answer the first question, one of my coaches asked me in a group setting about 15 years ago how much money I had spent in my career on coaching. And distinct from going to seminars where you get motivated or learn things, coaching, which would be people that I hired for interventions to intervene in my thinking. And I had to add it up. I had no idea, but I know I'd spent quite a bit because I'd made quite a bit of money. And so I came back about a week later to the same group because she was asking me in this group coaching thing. And it was $250,000.
Wow.
By the time I was 50. So age 22 to 50, $250,000, which, that's a pretty expensive college education. And then since then, maybe not as much, but, maybe another 150. So I'd guess $400,000. And what did I get back from that? Did I get like a 10-fold return? No, probably closer to 100.
Wow.
Great investment.
Wow.
And
that's powerful.
I mean, we're the best investment on the planet.
No question.
And
investing in yourself. No question.
Yeah. Now, if you're, say, oh, well, I invested in Tesla or Apple. Well, you invested in Elon Musk and you invested in Steve Jobs.
Yep.
So, and guess who invested more money than you in Steve Jobs and Elon Musk? They did.
Yep.
When they launched their companies, they bet it all. And they continued to bet it all.
No
We're
question.
the best investment. Now, you got to be in some kind of vehicle.
Yes.
Where you can leverage that investment and produce the maximum amount of wealth. Would I hire a $5,000 a month coach if I had a job that had no real upside and I made 10 grand a month? No. But if you're in a business or a sales career or some kind of opportunity where you can 10x your income, well, then it's a really good investment to go all in on you.
No question.
And why not?
As a fiduciary, my job is to give my clients the best advice. I don't sell them products or services. I align with them and putting them before myself. And I always lead with exactly what you're saying, invest in yourself. Cause I have coaches and mentors that whether it's an investment management coach, or if it's a marketing coach or a life coach, like I have people that I would go through seasons of my life to level up and to learn. And so that I can turn around and, like you said earlier, I'm a seeker. I'm curious. I'm someone who likes to learn and I like experiences. And when you learn enough things and when you seek things, you can turn around and then you can give it back to people. And that's kind of one of the beautiful, dynamics of life is there's this idea of the rule of thirds. It's like the third of people in your contacts that are ahead of where you are, that are people that can be mentors and leaders and give you insights so that you can catch up. And then there's the pocket of people in the third that's right where you are that you can go through the field with, and you can go through the trenches, so to speak, and you can learn and share ideas and best practices, lock arms together like a battle buddy. And then the third below you, not that they're below you, but they're just coming up. They're learning. And so now you've taken all that information and you can give it back. And I think it's a beautiful kind of circle of information. And at the very least, you're just leaving the world a little bit of a better place. And it sounds like that you've had that experience. And so for you as a coach, those times where you are maybe not on your A game, or you're not feeling it, or you got the mully grubs, or there's something going on in your life that's not where you want it to be, do you still lean on mentors, or do you have tools, tips, and tricks that you can implement in your life to get to where you want to be?
Well, it might sound a little unbelievable or even arrogant, but my life's work is about vision and self-motivation, and I have mastered it. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. But I actually don't get in a funk, and I don't get down, and I don't get sideways. And if I do, which I can't even remember the last time that happened, that might last for a few hours.
Wow.
Now I do have not a virtual mastermind, but an actual mastermind of people that I rely on. I have a coach. In fact, one of my criteria for hiring a coach is I want to know who their coach is.
Yes.
Because if somebody's a coach, but they don't have a coach, they're a hypocrite.
That's true. And if someone's not willing to invest in themselves, how can you as a coach ask somebody to pay you to their money? Right. Like right. And it's also, and I've been talking about this. I have 3 businesses, and one of the businesses I run is called the Vortexes of Light. And it's these retreats we do every quarter. It's transformational healing. We work with plant medicines. We do all sorts of really interesting stuff. And the people that run it with me, we were talking at a retreat we had a couple of weeks ago, and we were like, if you're going to charge people X amount of money, you have to be willing and have paid that type of money to a coach or a mentor. You can't ask someone to pay 12 grand a year to come to 4 retreats if you've never done it. Like it's like right. there's, and again, you can kind of fake it till you make it, but there's a belief and there's a power and there's a knowing when you've done it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's how I stay. I practice what I preach. About 25 years ago, I wrote this book. You should have it somewhere in your stack.
Love it.
Have you seen that?
With Your Hair on Fire, How to Master Self-Motivation and Stay on Fire for Life. I love that. Talk about that. Talk about the context of that book.
Well, the idea to write it came from one of my first most powerful mentors, a guy named Lou Tice, who owned the Pacific Institute. He's passed away since. He's a former high school football coach.
Is he Mike Tice related to him?
No.
Another head football coach? Okay.
Nope. And so anyway, one of my first investments is I paid Lou Tice in 1983, maybe $11,000. That was a lot of money in
Back
1980.
then, for sure.
I paid him $11,000 to go to a week-long seminar with him.
Wow.
And he sent me home with a briefcase of like 10 videotapes. And 3 months later, I went back and gave him another $11,000. And one of the key distinctions that I got from him was that desire is not motivation. And I always thought that if you wanted something bad enough, then you'd get it. If you had a white hot burning desire for something, then you would get it. And, it's not saying that that doesn't ever happen, but most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time, desire has nothing to do with progress. It only has to do with direction. Like I'm looking over there and I really, really, really want that, such that I'm all worked up about wanting it. But that's different than doing the work to get it.
Yep.
Because the work to get it is loaded with those push the wheelbarrow up the hill scenarios. And so what's the story you have about pushing the wheelbarrow up the hill? And if you don't have a story of inevitability, if you don't have a story of want to do that work, love to do that work, if the way you have the story is, I got to pay the price, I got to grind,
right,
I got to suffer, for the end result. Well, the problem is the suffering is all the way up the hill, right? And the end result only lasts for moments.
Yes.
Now you got the wheelbarrow up the hill. Now what do you do? Well, you probably go back down the hill and do it again, right? So the whole thing is 99.9% suffering and grinding and price paying. And so anyway, he just taught me that desire is not motivation and motivation is different. And he didn't actually use these words. He didn't use motivation. He didn't use the word vision. He didn't use the words that I use to describe motivation, but he introduced me to the concepts that motivation is an energy. It's a physical energy. It's an enthusiasm. It's a creativity. It's a problem solving. It's a creative interpretations, right? Creative interpretations is I got the wheelbarrow, I'm looking at the hill, and what kind of story do I create? Yep. What separates man from every other animal, mammal being on the face of the earth is we are the only living being that has been gifted creative thought.
Yep.
We get to make up stories. No other animal makes up stories. They all follow instinct. They all follow their genetics, their DNA. So, fight or flight, it's just survival.
Yep.
And human beings create. So if you, go back up, look at the earth. Who has made the earth different? Humans. Sometimes to really good things, and sometimes we'll probably create ourselves right into destruction at some point, like the Romans did, right?
Every great empire falls. Yep.
Right. We're so creative, we'll just probably annihilate ourselves. But still, it's an immense gift. And so I call that red lights, yellow lights, green lights. So if you're standing over at the wheelbarrow, is your story a red light story, which would have you frozen? Like, oh my gosh, if I even try, I'm going to die.
Yep.
A yellow light story would be, oh, well, maybe I can, but what if it doesn't work out? Well, let me try. You take a few steps and you go, that's yellow light. So that's like pumping the brakes. You start, you stop, you start, you stop. Green light story is, this is going to be fun. I've got this. I'm going to crush this one step at a time. You focus on the process. You fall in love with the process. You don't take your eye off the prize, but you put all of your real laser focus on, what do I need to do today?
Yes.
Who do I need to be today so that the single daily action, the process, the steps are something I want to do, something I can see myself doing? If you want to hike across the United States, that's a daunting task if you just think about the end game. But can you fall in love with hiking 10 miles a day? Can you just fall in love with hiking? Can you become a hiker? That's the secret to walking across the United States. Because then every day you are doing what you love doing, you're being who you want to be, and you're just in the flow. You're in the process, you're hiking. And if you hike every day, you'll end up coast to coast.
The journey has to become the prize. I mean, it's great to have an end goal. It's great to have a vision and something to reach for, but you have to enjoy the process. And again, it may not be every day of your life, but for the most part, you really have to enjoy and fall in love with the process because, for someone, you don't know this part of my story, but I've held death in my hands a couple of times. One of them, my daughter, one, my mother, and my dad. I cleaned up his blood off the floor, and it's taught me the importance of time. And, it's one of those things where being present, it's cliche, but it's an absolute gift. And that's the only time we ever live. We're only ever in the present. And so if you're looking down the road a year, 6 months, 90 days to the end result of a goal, whatever that is, and that moment comes, well, you've just wasted that 90 days, that 6 months, that year, in a sense, if you weren't enjoying the journey. And I think that most people, they get caught up with guys like Gary Vee, who since changed his tune, but he was the hustle guy, like hustle, 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 hustle till your eyes bleed, like hustle porn, like just all this, like work 12, 24 hours a day, like all this stuff. And he's since retracted that because he's learning through his own journey that it's not just the hustle, hustle, hustle. It's the day to day. And so I think it's super important for people who are listening to get that, because if you're always just looking for the carrot, the carrot may never come and it may not be what you expected. And so you've just wasted time in the whole journey.
Yeah. And you got to remember, there's a lot of other people chasing that same carrot too. So sometimes you find you get all the way right before you're about to grab it and somebody snatches it out from.
That's right.
Or whoever's in control of the carrot moves it.
Yeah. Interesting little dynamics of just life and everything. And so are you of the mind, obviously being an entrepreneur, being independent, being in sales, even personally, how you take care of your mind, your body, and your spirit matters. Are you doing things, working out, training, bringing on new information? Like, what are some things you're doing to stay on top of your game?
Well, I work out 3 times a week, and the hack that I use to do that is I schedule an appointment. Because if I have an appointment, I'll show up. It's just the way I'm wired.
Yep, same.
It, makes things easier. So I have a gal. She'll actually be here in 45 minutes. She Zooms in 3 days a week, and she works my wife and I out. And, my wife and I eat very intentionally.
Beautiful.
And we study, the science of food and physiology.
Yes.
We're continually getting better there. One of our businesses is the essential oils business, which, that's a whole process of learning the effects of smell on physiology and psychology. And, then I also surround myself with, coaches and people that I talk to that inspire me. And I read or listen to podcasts like this or watch videos, probably 30 minutes to an hour a day. I get up at 4:00 every morning. I spend that first. It's not that I'm like early riser with an alarm. I go to bed at 8 or 9.
So you get your time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of productive stuff happening between 8 and 9 p.m. So, we go to bed early, we get up early, and that quiet time is where I study and I read and I learn and I find new people to be curious about and sharpen the axe.
I'm big into what's affectionately known over the years as biohacking, and it's just augmenting your body, your mind, your spirit, everything. Total human optimization. And there's a couple guys that I follow, Ben Greenfield, Paul Chek, some of these, thought leaders in the space, and it's just allowed me to show up well for myself so that I could show up well for my family and my business and my relationships. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's really a lot easier if you're fit for service, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I love that you're in that space. Are you into anyone specifically when it comes to health and wellness, nutrition, like food is medicine kind of thing? Do you have any tips, any books, any podcasts that really have you clued in that the listener or viewer can plug into?
Well, Ben, we're not really close friends, but Ben and I lived in the same town he still lives there. I live in Hawaii now, but he just early on in his biohacking, he used one of my products for years.
Beautiful.
Probably still does. I'm not sure, but I follow Ben. A lot of people like him. I probably take more of the shotgun approach than lasering in on one person. I might in a week's time read 10 people's views. And I'm not sure why, Jesse, but I don't always pay attention to who wrote the article.
Yeah, you just get the information and go.
Right.
Yeah. It's good though. It's a good way to look, because not everybody everybody has different information. Everybody has different experiences. Everybody has different tinkerings that they've dealt with. And I think that I'm the same way. I mean, there's guys out there like Aubrey Marcus, Paul Check, Ben Greenfield, Anthony DiClemente, like these guys that are out there being guinea pigs. Tim Ferriss is another one who's mighty.
He's really out there.
He's really out there. Yeah. I play in some of those same waters, but but it's whoever you can learn from that's going to make a difference. You're just going to implement. You're just going to put it in your life, and so it doesn't matter how you get it. But as far as your journey, you're looking at 2021 and just kind of where you're at in this season of business and life. What's on the horizon for you? Do you have any things you're looking to knock off the bucket list in terms of travel or experiences? Do you have any business goals? Like, what are you looking at in the next, year to 2 years, or just the future?
Well, a great deal of my model. So I sold my two of my companies in 2017 to a $2 billion company. And what that freed me up to do was just develop my coaching business, which was always that was my bliss. That's my zone. That's my secret sauce. And so I just launched into that as a full-time business, which did really, really well right out of the box. And then 2020 came and I relied heavily on live events, retreats, small retreats, transformational retreats, or, large events, 2-3 days with large groups of people, and even keynote speaking. And so in 2020, I had to pivot. I didn't really have the team to pivot with. I had to pivot to digital.
Yep.
And so 2020 was a learning experience. So when you look at my whole life, you say, well, look how many years he totally yard sailed. But probably 2020 was a yard sale.
Right.
that was a bloodbath.
Fire sale.
And yeah, I mean, we made a lot of things work well, but that was definitely a learning year. 2021, I think I've got it figured out. Probably won't really manifest till the last half of 2021, but that's what I'm doing is, how do you deliver coaching at scale?
Yes.
Virtually?
Yes.
And then I also firmly believe by the last half of 2020, everybody's going to be rushing back into the meeting rooms and the retreats because we're all tired of Zoom.
It's already starting. Yep.
And we're tired of being at home. And so I think, the future there is beautiful. My wife and I, a couple of days ago, bought a motorhome, sight unseen.
Very cool.
And July, August, September, and October, we are with the dogs going to travel, maybe not every state, but we're going to do the entire North America thing.
Beautiful.
In a motorhome.
When you come to Atlanta, let's connect.
We'll be going through Atlanta, no doubt. We're not going to see places.
Yes.
We're going to see people.
Love it. Listen, the most important commodity or currency in this world is relationships, no question. And having people that you can do life with and be challenged by and grow with and just kind of be there for, that's the secret sauce. I mean, everything else is kind of built around that, but I love it. I love the mindset. I do want to know, where does the middle name or the moniker Bliss come in?
Well, actually at the moment I'm in Central California at Bliss Ranch. My great grandfather on my grandmother's side, they're Blisses.
Okay.
And they were California pioneers, or before 1850, they settled California and were big cattle ranchers, like 50,000 acre
Wow.
cattle ranchers and farms. And I have held on to the last 500 acres. Every generation basically sells off,
Whittles down. Yeah, it finally comes
right?
down. Yeah.
Because farmers and ranchers never make enough money to keep property. So I have a 1 bedroom, 1 bath, very nice cabin off the grid.
Love it.
Totally solar powered, well water, fishing pond,
Nice.
wildlife. And I'm here at Bliss Ranch. It is my real middle name, has been forever. It was my dad's middle name too. And I never used it in business because I always thought it was kind of pompous. But in about 2000, as soon as search engines became popular, before Google, when your name on the internet was important, people would not Google me, but whatever was before Google, they wouldn't get me. They would get the #1 porn star in America, whose name still is, but I don't think she's the #1 porn star anymore. Brooke Richards.
Wow.
So my marketing team just said, hey, this is a problem unless you want to be associated with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how are we going to do that? And I think I had evolved to the point where my self-esteem could handle the criticism of a pompous name with 3 names in it, Richard, Bliss, Brooke, and the middle name sounds like you just made it up, like Prince did or something, right? So anyway, that's where it comes from.
It's a great story, brother. It's the lineage, the tradition. It's stepping into, just being who you are. It's how you were born. And just, it was a nice pivot to get away from the porn star. But
yeah.
But real quick, before I jump off, I want to talk about, I personally have heard a lot of things about California, and I know that's where you are right now, but you're off the grid in California. So it may be different for you, but I mean, I'm big into like Joe Rogan and the folks that were over the Comedy Store, and like, there's like a mass exodus of people to like, Arizona, Texas, and there's different places that people are going to, the Pacific Northwest. But how has it been during the pandemic with, regardless of political views, but like everything that's happening in California? It seems like California and New York are pretty much the toughest places to be living right now for business owners, for entrepreneurs. They're making it really hard. Even like Canada, Trudeau and what he's done up there. How's it been being, someone who lives in California during the pandemic?
Well, I don't live here. I live in Hawaii, but okay. I come here to the ranch a couple times a year for a month. So I have a lot of friends here. I grew up in California. It just depends on what's going on and what your viewpoint is as to whether or not California is attractive. If you own a business that requires physical traffic, from a gym to a restaurant to, a bar, anything like that, then the liberal states, Hawaii being more liberal than New York and California combined, those people suffered mightily from, and I'm not speaking to a preference here one way or the other, but liberals tend to follow the science and follow directions. They go to school, they get a good education, they get a good job, they stay with a company, right? And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but if Fauci says this is the way it is, the liberals follow that, right?
Yes.
The conservatives basically tend to thumb their nose at anything that comes from that direction. They're rebels. They end up being business people, right? You don't start a business if you follow directions, because starting a business is just a great way to lose everything you have.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it's, I think that from a business standpoint, it just depends on what kind of business you had. Now, I mean, personally, gosh, I probably lost $1 million last year because people could not go to hotel events.
Yes.
But would I prefer that people could go to hotel events? I don't know. I don't know. I might have lost $10 million getting sued by people who got COVID from coming to my events. I don't know, right?
Right.
None of that stuff is my expertise. What I will say, Jesse, about all of this is that we are all so close to the forest here in defending our political orientation, our values, that we're not seeing the trees.
Yeah.
And the trees, if you back up and look at the timeline of the United States of America over the next 50 to 100 years, we have some huge problems to overcome.
Yep.
Whether they're environmental or cybersecurity, and, you know, wages for normal working people. I mean, you know, this is a liberal statement, but, you know, it's really probably not right that somebody works 40 hours a week and they can't afford rent. I don't know. That's not maybe good. It's maybe not good that Apple and Facebook and Google and all these companies that are making $50 billion a year in profit don't pay any taxes. That's probably not good. It's probably not good that our border is like a Swiss cheese, you know, like anybody can walk across our border. We have big problems.
Yes, we do.
And we're not going to solve them divided.
Nope. It has to change. We have to unite.
And how do you do that? Well, instead of defending that you're right righteously, how about actually go be curious about those lunatics on the other side? You know, how about you like look in there and go, how on earth did you ever decide to think that way?
Yep.
And you might learn something called empathy.
Yes.
You don't have to agree with somebody to understand how they arrived at that conclusion. You know, you could be interviewing a serial killer.
I just interviewed a guy that was accused of being the London bombing head terrorist, and he was tortured for 12 days. I mean, it's some crazy shit.
Yeah. So, but if you studied that person's life story,
yeah,
you could understand how they arrived at those conclusions, including being a nutcase.
Yep.
And does that mean you agree? No. But if you have empathy, wow, if we have empathy for each other, we can solve problems, and we don't end up name calling, and, you know, we've just disintegrated in the last 4 years into extreme polarism, and it's childish, it's stupid, it's criminal, and it's Roman Empire like. Yep. Hello.
People get romantic about their beliefs, and people want to be a part of a tribe. And as long as those things are existing, it's going to take a whole lot of love and empathy to get back to where we should be as a collective. But, you know, the interesting thing is I've seen, and I do believe, at least on a micro level, that we are heading that way. And I've seen consciousness and awareness raise in a lot of different ways. And so I do believe we're on the path. You know, I'm 39. I don't know if I'm going to see it in my lifetime if I live a long, healthy life. But I do have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I sure as hell am going to do everything I can to help them get to that point. So,
yeah, you want them to be able to launch a business,
no question,
successfully without being handcuffed by, you know, duct tape themselves to death in regulation. And you also want them to be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water. And you also want them to raise their family in the United States of America and not have it look like living in Israel.
Yep.
Where, you know, they have to be afraid of getting bombed every day.
I'm a rebel at heart, like you mentioned, and personal sovereignty is a big deal for me. So whatever I can do to facilitate that. But brother, I want to say, it's the first listener, the first viewer of this episode. Thank you for being you. Thank you for the conversation, the journey. And I'm looking forward to seeing where we connect in the future. But he's the amazing, the mighty, the powerful Richard Bliss Brook. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of the Jesse T Show.